Well, I wonder, David, whilst we're just waiting the last minute that we tend to wait, whether you wouldn't mind explaining to people how interactive they're going to have to be today.
Um, yeah, this is very much a sort of a two-way conversation rather than a one-way send. Um, and hopefully, by the end of it, Graham and Andrew will have a view in terms of how they want to develop the website, particularly in terms of providing support to, and I'm going to focus for the moment exclusively at a parish town council level. But there's plenty of space for individual sort of inputs and thoughts too. Um, so what are we trying? What we're trying to do is to create a simple way that a lot of very busy, stroke, potentially quite uninterested parish councils um,
Absolutely.
um, can input or implement net zero sort of processes or sort of help move towards reducing carbon output and to make that journey as painless as possible because much of the thinking has already been done for them. That's not to say they will need they can't have a completely radical view, but it's often much easier to start with something and modify it than it is to start with a blank sheet of paper.
Mhm.
The other issue is that with the great collaboration, particularly with Graham's side and the website itself, there is a vast database of information. But unless you've got a very good search engine or you've been party to lots of the Great Collaboration Wednesday meetings, you're probably unaware that some of this information exists. So how do we link all of this really good information into a coherent narrative that allows us to make decisions based on evidence and advice from more experienced individuals in particular areas?
Mm.
So it's a pretty big ask.
It's
Um, but your thoughts and your views and your support will all be massively helpful. Um, so once Graham is happy for me to go, what I'm going to do is I'll take us through the great collaboration website as it is at the moment, just to sort of get us a feel of what currently exists, and then go to a proposal, and then I'll lead you through each stage, and we can debate and negotiate, and I'll make some notes on the slides. And then once we get to the end of it, then hopefully Graham and Andrew will have a clear view of where they want to go, if they want to go down this particular route or not. So over to you, Andrew. Graham, are you happy for me to crack on?
Yeah, just a couple of points to preface you, David. If I'd really been thinking straight, I would have suggested that everybody take a look at the presentation that Gary gave us from Corsham a couple of weeks ago, because it would have been a wonderful preparation for this in terms of how you can come up with a very simple plan and then follow it with rigorous post-plan measurements to see what the impact has been. So that would have been one recommendation. The second one is to say that the website that we have at Great Collaboration at the moment is largely as it was inherited when we took it over. And there is a redesign in place. And of course, what you're doing now will hopefully make that a much more straightforward and sensible, logical path down which we're passing. So what you see at the moment is not ideal from our point of view, but where we should be heading is part of what your exercise is involved. And then the third point I'd put out is that the knowledge base that we have, the wiki, if you will, on which I record all these events, is growing gradually with other links as I put them in or other people contribute them. And it is provided with an AI search engine, so it can find stuff both on the site and off it. And I do ask that everybody has a go at using it if they can and come up with suggestions. But apart from that, it's all yours, David.
Gary, I'm delighted you've joined us because unfortunately I missed your presentation. Uh, so your input will be really, really welcome. Okay, so let's start off with having a look at the current website.
Could I just go back a step?
Of course you can.
Firstly, is one of you an IT expert who creates websites? Or are you using someone to help you with that?
Over to you, Graham.
There are plenty of people around who are good at that sort of stuff. We do have an intern from King's College London working with us who spends her entire life working with websites. And she's getting to grips with what's there at the moment. If, on the other hand, you're volunteering because you'd like to do something that improve it, don't let me stop you.
I am no expert in IT. My background is as a scientist professionally, a farmer in the past, and someone with a lifelong interest in environment, climate change mitigation, and with a lot of scientific understanding, if you will. And I am a volunteer with Hampton in Arden Parish Council. Is there anyone else from Hampton in Arden Parish Council on this call?
No, I think you're alone, Jane. But
okay, and getting them to move is like pushing mud uphill.
Well, I'm sure that's something that David is going to address because we all have that problem. And there are plenty of people around who worked out ways of getting around that problem. So I'm sure we'll get ideas there as well for you. But in the meantime, your experience and your interests, very, very welcome. And I hope that we'll be hearing and getting more from you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, can people see the website?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so at the moment, as Graham said, if you, and I'm going to focus on councils at the moment. So if you go into council, you've got a lot of stuff here, and it's fairly basic, but it's a solution start point. And I won't open up the resource pack because it just leads you to a directory of documents. So that's currently what we've got at the moment. Now, the other thing that there's also on the website is a lot of information that is quite low level in focus and covers a breadth of issues from biodiversity through to carbon issues through to all sorts of things. So whilst it covers an awful lot, for me personally, there isn't a logic to it. So I struggle a little bit trying to find what I need. So what I'm going to do now, having shown you that, is I'm just going to go through a sort of a storyboard. And I'll just wait till that comes. Now, forgive me, it will be I'm not going to put it as a display because I want to be able to change it and amend it. So what we're trying to do, I think, is to provide a structured pathway to enabling parish and town councils to support, in this case, it's NetZero, we refine it, reduce carbon, by maximise the utility of the information already held on the Great Collaboration website. So it's a question of let's not reinvent the wheel. It's about how do we actually create a structure that we can approach information. Now, the great thing about the collaboration website is it covers quite a large, a number of big areas. So there's biodiversity as well as carbon reduction, as well as various other components. So whilst I'm focusing quite selfishly on the carbon reduction component, there are other factors that we need to consider. And that may be that what we need is a landing page will allow us to decide which area we particularly want to go into. And then the next, so we've got sort of, for example, reducing CO2, we've got biodiversity, we've got flood management, and I'm sure there's others. I didn't bother doing a complete research, it was just various groups. But what we also need to take into account is the website is trying to allow all sorts of different groups to come in and exploit the information. So it might be a parish and town council. It could be a community group that's got an interest in trying to do this, or it could be an individual. And the information for those particular groups might be the same, but it's probably going to be subtly different. So if I'm an individual, I might want to look at this at a very individualistic level, doing all sorts of potential projects or programs that I could do for me, my property, or maybe engage with a number of people in doing something. So I think we need to accept that there are different information requirements depending on how and why you're engaging with the website. I've just put a mock up there. It's by no means anywhere near what a graphic designer would do. And I'm sure it could be done in a much more coherent and elegant fashion. Before I move on to the next slide, is there anything that anybody has any pushback on or suggestions with regard to these comments I've just made?
I think the comments are very straightforward and very clear, David.
You're happy with that?
I'm slightly concerned with the choice of 3. I take it that will increase as we go down the route.
Oh yeah, no, the 3 were just off the top of my head.
Okay.
They could be as little or as many as we want them to be. It was just I needed to start somewhere.
Absolutely. I think in that case, go for it.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to focus purely on reducing CO2, and I'm going to be doing it at a parish and town council level. So what I would suggest is that rather like in the old-fashioned days we used to have when we were installing new software onto our computer systems, there was a wizard, and the wizard would take you through various stages, and you would accept or not. And it's that sort of mentality is in the way in which I'm sort of suggesting that we do this. So the next stage is, hopefully, what we'd be looking at is setting a target. Because if you're going to do a lot of stuff and expel a lot of energy and a lot of money, eventually you need to have at least some sort of measurable point from where you're starting, and then having another measurable point as you move towards the middle and then the end to show that what you're doing is actually making a difference. And so what we're looking at is to set the targets. Now, I've got my footprint on the impact website. So if you see here, if you want to go on, depending on how many screens you've got, you can go to that particular website and put in your own town or council or house, and it will produce a whole bunch of information about how much CO2 you are generating. So for Ushot Parish Council, the total amount that we're generating is 10 kilotons of CO2 per year. Now, we can reduce that 10 kilotons by the amount of vegetation we've got, and the sequestration will remove about 12% of that. So what we are looking at is a target of 8.8 kilotons of CO2. The other thing it does is it breaks down where the CO2 is being generated. So if you look at the bottom part of the slide here, you can see that we've got road transport, industrial and commercial, housing, agriculture, F gases, whatever F gases are, various other bits and pieces that are there. So that allows us to start to drill into what's causing it. Now, we can't tackle all of it at once. We've got to nibble away at it and deal with it on a bit by bit basis, because there's only a small number of us in each parish or town council, and only a certain amount of enthusiasm and energy to actually sort of get this done. So the first process would be target setting, and the website could be designed to actually help you do that and generate the target that you're trying to go for. And then also with the impact tool, actually provide the subcategories and the areas where we'll be that we need to look at. Now, I've highlighted housing. Simply for me, it's the easiest thing to get my head round, because the problem with road transport is that we as a parish or town council have very little impact on that. And then when you look at industrial and commercial, it depends on how big that is for you. And I would suggest that may be the second area that you might want to get your teeth into if you've got the housing bit well and truly sorted. Before I go on to the next slide, any feedback or questions on that?
No, can I ask a question? Sorry, I feel a bit like an interloper because I'm not a regular.
That's right, Lise, no problem.
I've just looked my parish up. There's something about where you land in the national and local authority context, isn't there? It's where you sit as parishes. So you could, is there a bit, I know this is sort of you looking at, you can see what your footprint is for the people in your parish, but there may well be an initiative that's happening around transport or housing, which you could magnify or jump on.
Oh, Louise, absolutely. And I think once we break down the input, once we get onto it, you'll see that there's all sorts of options that we can do in order to maximize that.
Okay, yeah.
And this isn't a rigid structure. This is a structure. It's a set of guide rails, which is highly flexible and can be adapted to specific and individual circumstances.
Yeah, okay.
Graham?
Just one thing I would say for Jane is that the whole point of the great collaboration is to try and pull together all the activities that are happening either nationally or immediately within your area. So your point is very well made, that there may well be lots of other stuff going on, and we're trying to pull it all together so that when people go trekking through this path of David's, they will be informed what else is happening that could be useful. The second question I had, David, was there's obviously no way that you can reduce your carbon output to zero. So is there any plan for offsetting coming in here later?
I'll make a note of it because actually I hadn't really thought about it.
Well, there's no way that your 8,000 tons is going to come down to zero when you've got 4,000 tons being generated by the motorway around you.
And the airport.
Yes.
That flies over us, or very close to us. So yeah, I mean, I think whilst we're looking at net zero, I think what we're really looking at is lowering it as far as practically possible is probably a better way of defining it. Stuart.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm very minded by a talk. I can't remember the lady's name. Somewhere from the South Coast who'd done a lot on decarbonising her council. Her aim was to decarbonise the town, At the end of her presentation, she said, don't whatever you do, try and calculate your town's total CO2, or indeed think that you can actually change that. You can't. She said it's a complete waste of time. I'm also very interested in what Jane was talking about. I've been doing a lot of reading about soil ecology recently, and agriculture, regenerative or conservative agriculture. And I was wondering if Jane could do one of these sessions on what she knows about soil and agriculture and the emissions of methane, which doesn't seem to get mentioned in the Great Collaboration.
Stuart, can I ask you to park that for a sec, but don't lose
Yeah,
it,
sure.
because the reason I say that is because there needs to be a whole thread done on agriculture.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you see where I've got my hopefully you can see my mouse is highlighting
Yes.
agriculture on the screen. So that's exactly the information that we should be looking for and working out.
Mm.
Okay, so that links in. Right, Gary, can I
I think Sue was before me.
sorry, Sue.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Sue Burton from Battle Town Council. Just a number of comments to make. We declared a climate emergency, but my council wants to predominantly work on their carbon footprint, their estate, their buildings, their transport. And we have actually completed the Local Government Association emissions footprint report. We've done that 2 years now. This year was better, more accurate, and we're expanding our scope 3. So I'm very interested to learn how we could bring in sequestration to offset. And I was hoping today would help me, because the calculation, I don't know if anybody's done that calculation with the LGA report, but you're always coming to 100%. So we get rid of our diesel van and something else goes up. So because it's done on percentages, so it has its limitations, and I don't know how to take that forward. That was one point. And then what you're talking here is about your community, the people, not just your civil responsibilities, your buildings, etc. We have the link with the community, and I would struggle to get my fellow councillors to say it's our responsibility to sort out the whole of our town and our carbon emissions. But we, in the committee that I chair, biodiversity, carbon and biodiversity, we push with the community groups trying to bring in new, but it's that division between whose problem is it to solve. Much as I'd like to, we're stuck with getting our fellow councillors on board. But it feels like the Great Collaboration is, as it says, a great collaboration, and you want to go wide and look at your community as a whole.
Yes, Sue,
a number of bits, sorry, but I was really wanted to say all those bits.
Yeah, Sue, that's fine. I must admit, I think that approach by the councils, slightly sort of delegating their responsibility. I mean, you're there to represent the community, not the council buildings. Yeah. And yes, handling and managing community building, council buildings, yes, that's a sort of, you try and get that done as part of the leadership process of getting your house in order first. But unless we address the community, we might as well pack up and go home, because that's where the bulk of it's being generated. Yeah. Gary?
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of disagree a little bit with you there, David. I'm going to echo what Stuart and Sue have been saying, that I think, as I kind of reiterated in my presentation, if you're aiming to get your parish to net zero as a town council, you just don't have the authority and you don't have the resources to make that happen.
Agreed.
So I think it's much better to focus on, like say, getting your own house in order first. And that's what we're doing at Caution Town Council. We're focusing on getting our organisation to net zero. And we're also supporting the wider community where we can to help them get to net zero. But that's not the kind of focus of our net zero work. It's to get us to net zero, because that's what we can control.
But in a way, Gary, I mean, I absolutely hear where you go, and I completely agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't mean to be a harbinger, sort of negativity, but actually, the council's just faffing about with a few buildings is going to make absolutely zero difference in terms of CO2 output in the round. And yes, there is an issue, but one of the things I'm hoping to do through this process is to expose the weaknesses, because of course, part of the process of the Great Collaboration is also to lobby some of the government structures. And if there's enough of a cohesive voice, this lack of leadership from the centre and lack of resource from the centre might be exposed. Because you're absolutely right. Apart from enthusiasm and engagement, there is little or no funding to support any of this activity at the tier 3 local authority level.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you're completely right, Dave. But I'm just talking like, if you're talking about target setting, whereas a target that's achievable for town council stuff, then trying to tackle the parish's overarching climate emissions is just way and above beyond what we can actually do. But coming to your point about the categories you've listed there, I mean, if I was doing it from my point of view, like say housing and stuff, I would start with kind of like my targets would be how many houses can we insulate in the parish? How many houses can
Gary,
we put
I'm about to go on to that.
Okay,
if you could hang on to that, there is a logic to there is a madness to my logic.
Okay, I just say I wouldn't start with the carbon emissions per se as a target. I would start with other targets and then use them to kind of calculate what the carbon.
But maybe what we need to do is part of the Great Collaboration work that we need to do is to I've created a target, but you're absolutely right. What we need to do is create a realistic target.
Yeah.
And that may be needing to calculate out things over which we have little or no control over.
And also that kind of like helps in terms of like reluctant councils saying, if you say like, oh, what we're going to do is going to make 50 homes better insulated, that's maybe a target that councils can get more behind than saying, oh, we're going to reduce our carbon emissions by 20 tons or something.
Yeah. So maybe one of the things that we will need to do in the future is to negotiate with things like the impact tool, and go to them and say, look, you need to allow us to be able to extract stuff that is factually, we as a town or parish council can do little or nothing about. So, for example, jets, aircraft, we can do very little about. Major parts of the transport we can do very little about. So we need to extract that from the figures. But at least we now have a something to actually work with, as opposed to a nothing. Great. I've got some really, really good points there. Graham, sorry,
No, just a very quick point for Sue and Louise, in that there have been several presentations in these sessions over the last couple of years about how effective it is to start at the community level and let them make the decision. So you go in and say, not this is what we need to do, but you go in and say, so what does anyone want to do? And by the time you've ended up with 15 or 20 volunteers who are fulfilling what they think is their plan, you're going to get a much better engagement, which sounds very much as if Louise has done that in her very high up village. So I just mentioned the point that for those who are having trouble getting sufficient people engaged, then starting from the community level up and getting them to make the decisions works very well. That's all.
Can I just reply? Thank you. Good reminder. But and the other thing about the impact tool, which is I found frustrating, because I have done a comparative report for my postal code for the last 2 years, and our impact, our carbon emissions have gone down, but you can't find out why. You know, there's no substance behind the why to then share with residents, which you would want to do.
They might have gone down because of national changes like power grid.
Yeah, that's exactly what I concluded, but I have to
or
guess
more
that.
efficient vehicles or something.
I have to guess that the
it's
tool
annoying.
doesn't help you
see what's
do
working.
anything. Yeah.
Okay, got that.
Sorry, you might have done this before, but for the local authorities work that I've done, I mapped out what the levers were. So I looked at there's an onion diagram I used in the 6th Carbon Budget and Local Authorities report, which sadly didn't go down to the parish and town level, though you were at the bottom of a triangle, which showed who's doing stuff. And in that, I looked at direct control, policies you control, place-based things, which you come into you have a roll around place planning, in that you're a statutory consultee on planning applications and stuff. But then it went out into innovation and, developing new things, and then partnerships and community communication, which I think is very strong for the parish. So that you've got a touch point through all those things, and then you've got an overlap with your sort of local authority and national government stuff. So another way of slicing the pie would be to say, well, we've got eco funding for houses, or eco flex coming through the local authority. How many of our houses are getting that? How much is our parish benefiting, or our town council benefiting from the scheme that the local authority may be rolling out? And it'll bypass you, but it might be interesting to get that data and sort of say, hang on, our area's missing out, because perhaps where I'm sat, we're a lot of stone houses, hard to treat. What would a good insulated house, which was affordable to run, look like in Heptonstall? Well, do you then sort of say to the town council, to the local authority, can we do one here as a show home? And then you work around that, and it sort of means, because people learn from each other, don't they? They look at what that local builder's doing and they go, oh, you've got a heat pump, can I come and look at it? So there's, I think, a really big role you have in enabling what needs to happen. It's a soft way of doing it. I mean, our parish stood up to Calderdale and said they would support a solar install on a conservation area, and the Calderdale planners turned it down, which was really annoying, because we were like, we would rather have that in our village in a conservation area and tackle climate change and energy costs than sit here preserved in aspic looking pretty and being used for potato adverts. So
Louise, do you have
yeah.
Could you send us a copy of that onion thingy that you did?
Yeah, I'll find it. Yeah.
Could you do that? Because I think this is the sort of stuff that we want to
Sorry,
really
I don't want to speak out of turn and pile in on you.
No.
There's different ways to engage with it, aren't there?
Absolutely. And this is the whole purpose of this conversation.
I'll find the onion now.
Right. Okay. So there's shed loads of stuff I've picked up from there. Loads of really, really good stuff. And it's going to take a little bit of thinking about how we weave this into the narrative, because all of it's damn useful. Right. Okay.
Sorry, can I ask, have any of you council people had any experience of using SIL money for climate change mitigation, or any activities related to what we're discussing today?
No, because it's actually really difficult to try and find it.
You can only get SIL money if you have a local plan in place. And we haven't had an up-to-date local plan in place for years. But what we do get is S106 money.
What's S106? Sorry.
Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, whereby generally larger developments negotiate with the planning authority on how much they can provide for local community sort of benefits. So
Okay.
I just got 250,000 to help with a bridleway, which I'm trying to construct from S106.
Great.
Right.
Sue?
Well, I mean, we've got a load of SIL money, but I'm up against people saying, "Oh, you can't use it for that." You know, I thought it would be a good idea to put.
As far
PV
as I'm
panels.
aware, you can use the SIL money, unlike the S106. The S106 has to be reasonably closely associated with the development, but the SIL money, and I think the town and parish councils get 25% if they have a neighbourhood plan in place of the SIL money which has been collected, and the SIL money is a set amount based on the floor area of the development.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
Sorry guys, can I just pause because funding is absolutely huge, but I don't want to go down too many funding rabbit holes. It's going to be big. I'll come to it in a sec if I may. Jane, Sue, sorry, you had your hand up for a while. Sorry, Sue, you're on mute.
Sorry, mine was about SIL money. Battle Town Council in East Sussex, we do have a neighbourhood plan, and we've used SIL money to change the light bulbs in our lamps in the street lighting to LED. Yes, and that was, you know, big money when you've got to change a lot of bulbs. Anyway.
I think Stuart also. I did some research. I think you can use S106 on NetZero initiatives as well. I'll need to recheck that, but I think there are options. I'll put S106. I've captured SIL and S106, so we can drill into that later, because as you see as we go through this process, funding is important. In fact, it's critical, because without it, we can achieve very little. Okay, I want to move away from this slide, if I may, and move on to the next bit of the process. So we've had a go at identifying some form of a target, and I completely agree with Gary that we need to make it realistic, and it needs to be achievable based on what we can actually do and have influence over. So that's a really good piece that we've picked out of that. Even within that target, there will be areas where we can actually make a difference. And for the sake of this discussion, I'm simply going to look at housing as the next step, because I think with my parish, I think that is probably the easiest thing we can wrap our heads around and start to make a difference. So one of the things we need to do is to try and create some sort of structure that allows us to work our way to dealing with reducing carbon emissions in a logical and manageable way. And I've simply used this format to show that we're going to deal with housing to start off with, and then we'll start to work maybe with transport, industrial sector. It doesn't matter. It's entirely up to the council in which order they want to approach the problems. It may be that we're missing something. So as Gary put in, and towns more than parishes, they have their own building infrastructure, and therefore they're going to make that their primary target to start off with. It's not a problem. It's just that you've got a list of things that you're going to deal with, and that we're going to start to work our way through trying to solve them in a logical and sensible fashion. And so if we imagine we're back in the web page now, so we've gone down the council, we're going to NetZero, we've got a little bit of something that's allowed us to target set, and then we've got something that's helping us to shape the priorities in which we're going to deal with the issues. And we've got the resources that we can then pull down to then make it absolutely applicable to the environment and the area that we're living in, because we're all different. Now, one of the things I do want to point out is that as part of the work we did with our district council and others involved, is that without access to local green power generation and local distribution of power, many of the things that we want to try and achieve in any of these big sort of sector areas are going to be challenging without cheap electricity. You know, we're a society that exists off electricity, and that's not going to go away. That's just going to get worse. So we need to work out, how do we generate that? And somebody also brought up the point about sequestration and also, you know, offsetting carbon. How do we do that? And how do we link our biodiversity and tree planting strategies into making a dent? But remember, the sequestration process is going to make, you know, 1 or 2% difference. It's not going to be a massive change. There are other issues we've already discussed: resources, funding, SIL, SO106, people. How do we enthuse people? How do we engage people? And local partnerships, both with other parish councils, town councils, with community groups, various other factions coming into it. And so we're being led now into a structure. And then from that, we can then link into all sorts of different areas, depending on where we want to go. And at a local level, we can download this and manipulate it to make it suitable to us. Now, Graham, did you have, I noticed your hand was up, sorry.
Yeah, it was overtaken by a comment in the chat from Louise about how one of the great advantages of your community energy facility is that it pours money back into the community. So
it does.
It does generate the cash that you can need to do other things.
Absolutely. And if you notice, in terms of its sequencing, it's one of the first things that we want to try and get into place, along with starting to work on dealing with it. So we've got a structure, and what this leads to is a much more refined structure that allows us to then start to hang stuff on the tree, if you like. So we've got the big roadmap, which is giving us, you know, the big structure, you know, where we're trying to go to, and then each one of these individual areas has its own roadmap, because they're actually quite complicated. You know, if you just want to look at housing alone, there's a myriad of issues that we need to deal with. And so each one of those is linked to a sub roadmap, and each of the components within the roadmap is eventually linked to a detailed action plan, step-by-step process that we can actually do some stuff as opposed to talking about stuff. And I'll come to that. And of course, they're all linked, hyperlinked. So the whole web is created around this structure. Now, I'm not saying it would use these particular arrows or anything like that. It's just a way of actually sort of linking the whole thing together. So if we now move into the domestic component and explore that in a little bit more detail. So what we thought, and I'm not saying that we've got any, you know, this is the right way to do it, it's just a way to do it, is that the first thing that we need to do is understand the housing stock and where we need to invest time and energy in. Because if you've got houses that are, you know, have a certification of A or B, then frankly, there's no point engaging with them because they're as good as they're going to get pretty well. And in fact,
or you can say to those ones, get yourself a heat pump and get the boiler upgrade scheme.
I'll come on to that. I'll come on to that because that is, as you can see, the replacement of the boiler, if it works for your building. And so one of the first things we're going to do is look at the certification across a parish. And then the next thing is, once you've got that, you've got to try and stop people losing heat for those houses with D and below. So that's how do we improve the insulation? Then there are houses still working on primarily electrical systems. So how do we actually replace those using much more efficient approaches? And then finally, the elephant in the room is about how do we replace gas boilers? And I'm just going to go off a slight detour here because I think what the collaboration website also needs to produce or link us to is the best evidence on what is the most suitable way of mitigating this particular capability. Because it's not a one size fits all solution. There may be, you know, a flat in a town may need a completely different solution to a 6-bedroom mansion sat in the middle of the countryside somewhere. And so I think there needs to be a lot of thought about how best to deal with this issue. And the website is there to help us make that decision. Because you know every decision is going to be unique depending on the blended mix of housing and various other things. Gary, come on in.
Yeah, David, I just wanted to suggest that also you could look at it from the other point of view. You could look at what you could do that would work for your parish. I mean, would your parish be more interested in more insulation for their properties? Would they be more open to like things like heat pumps or solar panels? And, you know, tackle the issue from that point of view, rather than looking at what is the best thing to get the emissions down. What would be the most kind of like, you know, best way to kind of engage?
Our plan would be, first of all, to find out which houses, and we're dealing with the housing stock here, which houses we need to focus our time and effort on. Number one. So that would then be the first conversation with the houses, the owners of the houses would be how to improve the insulation.
Yeah,
that's and so it would be on a, you know, if you went to a house and they were and they wanted to talk about oh yeah, we'd really like to do that, but we'd also like to do get off gas as well. So there's a conversation to be had there. It's not a single, you know, we don't have to be ruthlessly structured down this particular way of doing it. And if there are individuals who really want to drive ahead, that's fantastic. But it's trying to get the rank and file who are on the I'm completely uninterested to I'm vaguely interested, starting to engage in the conversation.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Is like, you know, if you got an idea for your town or parish,
yeah,
that would be more susceptible as kind of, you know, people would be more willing to listen to hear about it, then that would be the best scheme to go for. If you think like, you know, oh, heat pumps would have the biggest carbon impact for our community, but then, you know, nobody would be very much interested. But if you said like, you know, oh, okay, we can put loft insulation into your house and do, you know, help support that kind of thing, and you get quite a big uptake.
Absolutely. I'll come on to that in a bit more detail, Gary, because I'll go through that in some more detail in a second, because we're far from driving down into the detail, which we're going to need. Louise, sorry.
Yeah, I can see we've got the kind of whether we start with the people or whether we start with the data, haven't we, going on? So I'm just thinking.
I think you need to do both.
Yeah, it's both at once with agility, isn't it? Which is,
yeah, absolutely.
You'll be able to see. So if I was parish councillor at Blakesley, which is an off-gas place in Northamptonshire, you can see more and more heat pumps going in, and that is because a few core people in that village have had them installed successfully. They were on expensive, dirty oil, aging boilers, and there's a fantastic local installer. So it's like my mum in her 80s went to see someone else in her 70s and went, well, Rita's got one and it's working very well, and she showed me how it worked. So it's been done, and they go out to her, and now her neighbour's done it.
Yeah.
So and that installer has stuck by them and comes and programs it for her every winter. So you've got the peer group thing. So at that point, the parish really needs to go, we see this happening. Let's get an open day together and actually they didn't install a lot more insulation. They were good enough, so you don't have to have a super amazing house to get that right. So there's definitely something there about opportunistic and the boiler upgrades.
Oh, absolutely.
Available.
This,
So,
I think whilst we can try to provide a structure, what we're dealing with is chaos. and I think that all we're trying to do is create a framework around which the chaos can generate.
Yeah, like checklists, I suppose.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we come into this bit, and there are links. So there are detailed links into action cards for each one of these areas. And again, these action cards are not fixed in tablets of stone. They're just solution statements. So if we move into an action card here, so we're dealing with the SAP score. So the first thing I had to deal with was my parish council. And there's a question about how do you deal with your parish council? How do you engage them? How do you bring them on side? How do you enthuse that? And I know that Graham has had some great speakers. And this is where, how best to do it would be fabulous if we could then link that to, best practice, where people have found working that, creating a net zero or a carbon reduction team, getting some volunteers. How do you do that? How do you train them so that when they are actually engaging with people, that they're talking good sense, and they're not going to be leading people astray. So there's a bunch of stuff where we need to link information resources to allow us to even just do action 1, which is engage the parish council. Action 2 is understanding the problem. So I know I've got a certain amount of housing stock, but which ones have EPC scores, which don't? What value are they? Now there are tools out there. So for example, if I go here, this is my parish, and this is the EPC ratings. You can see up the top there, which is outside of my parish, brand new estate, which has gone up. They're all absolutely hunky-dory. Some older stock here, but you can see the older village itself, the older parish is a right mix. But what you don't see are the number of houses that have no EPC score whatsoever. So when we come back, having done that analysis, we can then go back to this and go, how do we improve the SAP score? How do we actually get everybody up so we know what we're dealing with? And so we've got to do some work about getting engaged with people to get that SAP scores. Now, how do we do that? Could we do that at a parish level, where we get a contractor to come in? Because, of course, there's economies of scale. How do we fund it? So could I use the S106? Could I use SIL money? Could I use a grant from the district council? Could I do whatever? So again, we need advice on how best to resource that money.
You might you might be able to get that through the energy advice thing, because if you're going to find me eco, then you can get paid for it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that needs to be linked to the website. And so I can then go to the website. It tells me how I can source the money to do that.
Yeah.
And so once we've got the SAP scores done, they are then uploaded onto the national system, which then refreshes these information sources, which allows us to then work. So then we can then work out, because from that, we want to go back to, so we've got the SAP scores, we know what we're going to do. So we're going to go back to here and we're going to improve insulation. I'm not saying you are, but I mean, just say for the story. So we're going to do that. And we've looked at the information source that we've got on the website, which shows us that, 25% through the roof, 35% is through the walls, and so on and so on and so forth. So what's the best way? Well, cavity wall insulation, and if you then look at the environmental design and engineering data, again, linked in to their website, pulled in, which shows by far the most effective are simply cavity wall insulation and loft insulation. That's it. If you want to go for the big stuff, like solid wall insulation, external, internal, or floor insulation, you're talking seriously big bucks, and massively long payback periods. So you would make a decision about where you're going to focus. You know, the homeowners and the council's scarce resources. So, and the other thing, one I picked up from one of Graham's talks, who was actually talking about the whole insulation piece, was the issue of all the stuff that people put up in their attics. How do you move it around? Because often the contractors are not willing to move the stuff in the attics around. So they want a clean attic in order to lay the insulation down. So how do you actually address that particular problem? And so if we come back to here, so we've linked on that, that's taken to the action card. The action card links us to a whole bunch of resources to be able to do that. We then link on that, which takes us to another action card, for example, about insulation, which work needs to be done to complete that. Again, linking in resources, so that as we move down particular journeys, all the resources that we need is at our fingertips, because they're all linked into the website, so that you can go away and generate your plan. And if we get the website designed really elegantly, actually what we want to do is minimize the amount of time writing about stuff and actually maximize the amount of time doing stuff.
Couldn't agree more.
Because it's the doing that matters, not the talking about it.
Yeah.
And so we would, each of these would be built up for each of the areas. And then I'll put you onto the final slide, which goes back to this one up here, which is increasing local ground power distribution. And that is about creating a structure. So, for example, we're in consultation with one of the companies that will allow us to do this solar energy structure. We're just waiting for them to get the funding, and then as soon as we've got that, we will be going hard over to try and achieve as much of the housing stock. And they are developing a capability which allows. They look at all the roofs, and they can work out how much energy you can generate by putting panels onto people's roofs, and how much storage you need. So it's all quite clever. But one of the other areas, we again talking about agility, Louise, where you suddenly think, oh, here's an opportunity. We discovered that there's funding available to put in ground-mounted solar systems. So what we want to do is to put in solar panels for houses where it's going to be very difficult, or frankly not worth putting solar panels on because they're covered in trees, or because of the way in which the roof structure, or the way in which they're orientated, and provide ground-mounted solar to compensate. But what we want to do is to run it along the souths, on the south-facing field edges. So we're not taking any agricultural land out. We're simply just using the edge of a field on the south-facing field edges. We also want to look at agrovoltaics, which is this diagram here, slightly higher. So you can still plant and you can still use the ground underneath it, but we can still generate significant amounts of electricity, because we've got a lot of land that is green but is pretty much unused. And so what we want to try and do is to exploit all of that and to do it quickly, and then build it over time so that we become, certainly during the summer, a net exporter of electricity if the local power grid will actually allow us to do that. And so this would be linked into the concept and then a much more detailed plan in terms of how you go about doing it. So this is if I can just make even in my own head, this is about how we create the web structure, the website that helps us lead us through these various journeys allows us to be incredibly flexible and dynamic. So if an opportunity arises, for example, ground-mounted solar panels, then we can jump straight into that particular space and then facilitate the development of that.
David, do you know, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, right, Jane. Yeah.
District network operators, how receptive are they to very large systems? We've got 21 PV panels, and I know we had to go through a process in order to gain acceptance for their installation. But if you've got, I think this is a 13 kilowatt system, something like that. But if you've got, I don't know, several hundred panels, does this cause a bit of a hiccup with the DNOs?
It can do. It depends entirely on the infrastructure they put into place. So for us, where we've got some pretty Heath Robinson systems in place, until recently we were having power outages 3-4 times a year due to the flaky nature of the network. It may be that they can deal with kilowatts. They might be able to deal with a megawatt, but anything more than that would simply overload the system.
Yeah, exactly. So
there is a negotiation to be had with the providers of the backbone. But I mean, at least it gives us a conversation start point. And if that means that we have to really lobby and drive the DNOs to actually provide us with a backbone that we require, or we create a parallel backbone.
Do we have to get National Grid engaged in these conversations?
Not at a local level, I don't think.
No. I mean, I just wondered what they were actually doing at the moment to enhance the flow of electricity into their systems as opposed to out of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, we're past the witching hour of 1 o'clock. And we've had a really useful and effective conversation. Graham, can I pass it back to you as the sort of chair to sort of, and perhaps with you and Andrew, really because this is ultimately for your benefit, or all of our benefit, but the collaboration benefit particularly, in terms of, are we heading in the right direction? Is this something we really want to get our shoulder behind?
Sure.
Or do we need to look at it from a different perspective?
Okay. Well, today, Michael, I'm being Graham Stollett-Stones because he's had to leave us, but I'm here. As you know, David, we have, in terms of gathering and sharing good practice and signposting people to ways forward, that's very much what the Great Collaboration is about. We're in the process of doing a first upgrade of our website, which will include a whole section, as you know, on this issue of carbon reduction. What you've been describing today would certainly fit into that. Clearly, there's a capable of infinite expansion here as to how we go forward with producing all the action cards and getting all the information up together. So there's 2 ways that's can be made. Well, 3 ways it can be made accessible. One is through, an iterative process through a website. We're also having a Wikipedia, knowledge base, which has got all this information on, so people could actually search for and find the particular bits they want more quickly. Plus, of course, obviously events like this and individual training and so forth. As far as the National Grid is concerned, there is a lot of discussion at parliamentary level about allowing people to sell electricity directly to other people. At the moment, we're sort of obliged to go through existing energy suppliers and using the National Grid. And in some cases, of course, the substations are not up for it. I believe around the country there is a plan for upgrading the places where it's not yet that sufficiently capable, but I think it's going to take a few years before everywhere is reached. So there's different ways that can be approached in terms of the gathering and sharing electricity, but it's very much, yes, at the top of a lot of people's agendas. I'm sorry I was late arrival on parade today, but I was talking to another discussion about flood risk management for parishes, so it's all happening now. We've had Louise, I don't know if she explained who she is. She's very much involved at national level in terms of the government's adaptation panel, and she's heavily engaged in producing a lot of strategic items and strategic support. So I'm very glad she was able to be with us today. Now, we've got, obviously, present company, they may have some particular things to talk about that we haven't covered yet. Has anybody wanted to start a conversation about that? I'll have a quick look in the chat and see what might be coming from. There's been some stuff about having heat pumps installed. Sue you're saying sometimes it's taking a bit of a while, and it depends whether you've got a good installer or not. Has anybody else got any things they want to share? Stuart, you've had some installation in your place, haven't you?
Yes. I've got cavity wall insulation, a loft conversion, so that's all very well insulated. And I did get planning permission to get double glazed windows, so I've got those as well. So
Right.
being fairly well insulated, I have now got 4 heat pumps.
Oh wow, one for every day.
Doing various things.
Right, okay.
Wow.
I think that's a good point that was made earlier about there are different houses. I mean, I've got a traditional house in the Forest of Dean where there's good old forest stone making around the walls. If there is I don't think there is a cavity to fill in, but it's pretty solid. So the idea of having an action card, whatever you want to call it, for each type of building strikes me as useful. There are going to be issues around funding, of course there are, and I think particularly at parish level, the more we can provide ways of saying, well, let's club together on this, can we find ways of doing that? This is part of the larger scheme of things because particularly as and when district councils disappear, which the present government has a plan to do, parish and town councils will be very much more closely identified as being the nearest local government to the community. What that will mean in terms of what extra things we get invited to do or told to do, that's all being into discussion at the moment. But certainly, if in terms of getting together with people, say in a neighbourhood, say in a street of houses that need work in, getting things happening locally, that's as likely to be with a local parish or town council than anybody else. On the other hand, again, parish and town clerks, I was 8 years as a clerk, are pretty busy guys, and there's the councils have things to do as well. So actually working with the community, and I think that was mentioned earlier, to getting some group activity going is very, very important as well. And that's certainly something I say all the time. So to have ways in which we're doing that is good things to share. Has anybody here got some feedback to share about how they might have worked with their council and local council and parish council and communities working together? Anybody got any stories on that?
Sorry, not positive ones.
All right, okay, let's have the negative one.
If I can say so, on our climate and ecology subcommittee, which is the town council, we've got community members and we always feature what's going on in the community. How can we support? Advertising is all a high priority for sharing with the residents.
Right. If you're a subcommittee of the council, that's great because, well, there's two things, isn't it? You're following standing orders, but you can also make strong recommendations to your full council for funding. The other model which some parishes do is having a more informal working group, and it depends. So you don't have those connections, but perhaps you don't have to be quite so strict about the way you manage your meetings and so forth. Yeah. So there are different ways of doing it. But I think in terms of continuity, once you've got people interested, then it'd be good to find these models to keep them going. I mean, some projects and some initiatives have their time and they die back again and they start up again. We don't necessarily expect them to last forever. But the thing is, my perception is that, or my hope, is that the more we get people working together on things locally, that they will be then better used to doing that. And then if we get any real trouble coming down the road at us, they will be better able to deal with it. Jane.
Andrew, one positive thing, one of our two kind of lay people on our climate change bunch works for Arup, who I'm sure you know about as a sort of bunch who deal with infrastructure a lot. But on her list of useful things was a library of things. In other words, ensuring communities will share things like strimmers or, you know, lawnmowers or, I don't know, whatever you like, really. But if you've got any links to setting up such a thing, because I do feel it's pretty silly that everybody goes out and buys these things.
Yes, that's right. I mean, if there are things also that parish councils may be able to, you know, within limits, we're not talking about buying strimmers for everybody. One thing that's useful that some parishes are doing, they're getting hold of a thermal imaging camera. And that can be only about a couple of £100. But that can be loaned out to residents and say, you look outside your house on a dark night and think, gosh, look at all that energy and heat that's, that's escaping. So that can certainly be happening. In terms of equipment libraries, I'll make a note about that. Right, what we're doing with the wiki, as I call it, the knowledge base that we're building, is that, we're looking at anything that we can have that, and we had some great stuff about installers in the chat. Because we're not a public sector body, we don't have to be careful. We don't have to be quite so particular about saying this is a good guy, that's a bad guy. We can give people a list of people to choose from, provided we're happy with them, without too much.
Well, HeatGeek is quite a useful website for finding accredited air source heat pump installers in your area.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that we put in the wiki straight away. You know, if you want to look at it, check out this website, because if we do nothing else, signposting is going to be a great thing that we can do. I mean, if people have to search the web, you know, they can, oh God, but if they just get into our knowledge base, press a button and get at least some information, that's what.
Andrew, apologies, I'm going to have to thin out.
Okay, my friend. Thank you very much for what you're doing. You and I will speak again later about the ramifications of what you've talked about. Yeah.
All right, Roger. Catch you later. Cheers, everybody. Thanks so much. Bye.
What was that directory again for accredited people? Sorry, I didn't.
It's in the chat of the on the.
It's called HeatGeek, literally HEAT and then GEEK.
Yeah. We didn't used to know the word geek, did we? But we didn't used to know the word nerd. But never mind. Joanne, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just wondered, when the website is being done, could you please just remember that there are people on parish councils that don't know any of this, and certainly the message that comes out from our local, our district council and our county council currently existing, doesn't always get down to the parish level. And, you know, you're using terms that, you know, we don't necessarily know. And even if our heart's in the right place, you know, sometimes it's just, it would be, you know, just please remember to be quite basic, at least have a link to it for us. Because,
you're absolutely right. I try and remember that, but I hate abbreviations as much as the next person as well.
Don't use acronyms. Sorry.
No, there's a danger that you're right, Joan. If we're getting too much involved in this, that we're in danger of assuming wider shared knowledge, which isn't always the case.
It's just when they were talking about the scores, you know, of how would I don't even know how you get those.
I mean that's a good case in point. I mean, I actually I didn't know what a SAP score was until David told me some while ago. That's right. I mean, what we need to say is, you know, energy performance certificates for your building brackets, and you know, and then we can mention SNAPs and EPCs.
But I mean, they only tend to exist, don't they, when you sell or buy a house? I mean, they don't.
I mean, if you've lived in a building for a long time, you know, you quite probably don't have one. I mean, our house was built in the 1840s. Whether it was got a score or not, I have no idea.
No.
What we're looking at also is mapping things with the help of Parish Online, so people can find this stuff visually. I want to find out a parish council that's done a carbon net zero plan. Where's one to me, and I can talk to them about how they did it. You know, what we're looking at the moment is we've got a pilot program going in East Anglia, and the suggestion is that for those people that are either already have a parish online subscription or would be happy to take out a 3-month free trial, which is available nationally, I believe, then they can say, right, if you would like to fill in these half a dozen different bits of information that relate to your parish, you know, have you got a committee, have you got, you know, whatever it is, then that can appear on the website instantly. And that's what we're looking at, because that will also be encouraging. So, oh gosh, you know, it's already been recorded. So some of these things, I mean, just, you know, we've got hands all sorts of places.
I think that would be great, because we just outside Henley, and I know Henley are doing really, really wonderful things, but the lady who actually runs the Henley thing lives in our village and is too busy to do it for the village, so, or to do it for our parish. So it's sort of, you know, sometimes you just want to have that community link, and it doesn't always work. And also, to be honest, as a parish councillor, I have no idea if we subscribe to Parish Online, so I'll have to ask my clerk. So
yes, well, that's right. I mean, it's a community interest company, but obviously they want to make a surplus the same as any other business.
Yeah.
But they are very keen to make sure that they're providing a service around climate and environmental action, and what we're talking about. And this is, of course, I mean, obviously, David is very much working up on the carbon reduction net zero approach. There's other things around flood risk. There's other things around what we do in a heat wave, which is going to come at us. I was speaking with a chap just now while I was late from Communities Prepared, and they've been doing free training on heat waves, on floods, on power outages, and they're now having to do some on wildfires. So, you know, again, how many people know that that sort of information is available? If you log into their website, there's free training you can join into.
Oh, we'll provide the links to that as well. That sounds really useful.
Let me do that. Put that in the chat straight away.
Thank you.
Lovely guys. They've got funding to do this kind of thing, which is allowing them to give these courses out for free. They are also that was the substance or part of my conversation with the guy this morning, was thinking about having particular things for town and parish councils, because at the moment is community prepared, you know, it does what it says on the tin. Cheers, Andrew. He's gone.
Oh, great. Okay.
But of course, as we know, parish councils have their own context, background, and all the rest of it. And our clerks will be telling us, you know, what we can and can't do. And there's always issues around funding and what are our links with these other authorities and so on. And so in terms of, in this particular instance, we're talking to them about flood risk assessment. It may well be that a community can get the advice that they're already giving out, but a parish council might need a slightly more tailored advice or something with a bit of extra detail in it. So that's fine. So, you know, we're going to be talking some more about that.
Following this meeting, will you be issuing any notes, or will you just update your website to reflect some of the thoughts, etc., etc.? How will you do it?
Well, the answer is both. The recording of this meeting and the chat and the copy of David's presentation will be put online on our knowledge base. And that, if when you log in for these sessions, that makes that available. If I look, shall I get the link for that up for you as well and put that to you? The knowledge base itself is work in progress. It'll never be finished in a way. There'll always be stuff to add into it. It's already live to a certain extent, and some of that is available through the same link that I'm about to give you. And it's needing to be extended. So when you look into this link, which I'm about to put in, and you can see that this is getting to the table of all the different Banter sessions. This was number 69 in a continuing sequence, but there's also links to other elements of the knowledge base as well. So that is one of the things that we'll be doing is making that more and more visible as we improve the website going forward, so that our ambition is what has been the ambition in the digital world for some time, is people get what they want within 3 clicks of a computer mouse. That's the gold standard. And as present company may know, some of the worst places for that are district council websites. But anyway, moving swiftly on. But that's the gold standard. That's what we're trying to achieve. And the system we have, which we're using, which is something called Gitbook, which is the name of the software behind our knowledge base. We can ask it to search for something. So if we asked it for, I'm just doing it now. We asked it to search for floods, and then we get something like this. Shall I show you that on? Shall we do that live? Shall I work that through with you?
That would be nice. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Because you're my friends. Right.
Andrew, where did you get the funding for this great collaboration?
Right.
Only very briefly, it's a very quick answer.
No, sure. The initial funding was from a charity called MCS Charitable Foundation, and that funded the work in Herefordshire. They spent about £70,000 building the website. So it's there. We bought it for £1 because the people in Herefordshire just wanted to go national, but they didn't have the capacity to do it. So we're working on that. We have been looking at different sources of core funding, should we say. Because of what we're doing is relatively new in the world and it's a bit novel. We haven't caught anybody's attention yet. Where people like to fund, they like to fund something that's actually visible with communities on the ground. So we're doing some work in East Anglia, we're doing some more and all the rest of it. In the meantime, we have found a volunteer programmer to help us upgrade the website. It's a WordPress website. If you know about those, they're relatively easy to manage. And so I've been adding in a lot of content, but we've got a lady who's actually been off to have a child. She's wanting to get back into the business of being a computer paid programmer, and she's giving us some time to get her feet back under the table. So we're very fortunate in that. So that was probably a medium-sized answer to a short question. So here we go. Here's the knowledge, great collaboration knowledge base, and we can put in something we want to look for. What we've been talking about here? We say we'll put in carbon reduction and see what happens. Okay. So here we are. What happens? There was a whole banter session about things like that. There's a resource pack on the website which talks about a carbon reduction plan. There's things about other banter sessions that it's linking us to and so forth already. So the searching is already happening. It hasn't got yet, obviously, what David's been talking about today, because as he freely admitted, this is a work in progress, and we're getting that's going to be extended as we go forward. But run out of things. As you press the wrong button, we get back now. So that's do you wanna? Shall we? We can try something else. Would anybody else like to press a button and see what we've got on it? Any words?
Agriculture.
No, I
Sorry, Stuart?
Agriculture.
Agriculture, okay.
I think it's something we've been missing out on.
Oops. There won't be anything agriculture. Let's try agriculture, okay. Oh, no results for agriculture. There you are. So
we do need a session on that.
Yeah, and I think in terms of agriculture, obviously we've got our friend Jules Thompson, who is heavily involved in his links to the farming community, and there's got an agrivoltaics project. One of the things that David was talking about, how do we actually get solar energy off fields without destroying them for agriculture, because we need food security as well. So he's somebody that we could possibly do a session on this. But
well, I was hoping maybe Jane could.
Jane?
Yeah, I'd have to put together a lot more research in order to do this. I can give you a top level thing about it. It's the connectedness of everything on the agricultural front that makes life so very difficult. As you may well know, the Environmental Land Management Scheme made no mention of food production, and it almost encouraged farmers to make over land to vats or something and not to grow crops that might feed people. The Sustainable Farming Initiative, which was some other poxy scheme, was suddenly cut dead in its tracks because they ran out of money. But I don't know what it actually achieved. Agriculture, unfortunately, represents a very small part of GDP, consequently is very low on the government's list of things they need to deal with. And finally,
I think agriculture does feature quite prominently in greenhouse gas production. Nitrous oxide, methane, and they do burn a lot of diesel.
It does feature in that, but in terms of getting government to actually sort of speak positively about agriculture or to the farming community, you tend to get very third-rate ministers in agriculture by certainly judging on past experience, yes, greenhouse gases, but remember outdoor systems such as grass-fed animals are creating a lot less on the methane side.
Well, I've been doing quite a lot of reading about soil ecology and regenerative farming and carbon sequestration with good land management, which tends to get destroyed by ploughing. And
well, it's not
our
just
farmers
that.
still ploughing.
The machinery has got so much heavier and so much bigger that it compacts soil very badly. But, you know, this is where we're in this huge conflict between what do you want? I'm not necessarily against regenerative farming, but obviously your stocking levels have to be far lower. So you are, on the one hand, reducing the ability to generate food against maintaining better soil structure. But let's get into this here and now. It's 1:30. It's time we left. And this is incredibly complicated and plays onto every part of our lives, quite frankly.
Food and farming is a definite topic for another one of these sessions. And yes, we're right in that food security is occasionally getting mentioned in the national press, but it doesn't seem to be a top priority for the current government, which I think is a mistake. But there we go. There we go.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, I have made a note of your name, Jane. Sorry about that. But
that's all right. Don't worry about it.
I think.
Well, it'd be nice to hear from the scientists talking about it.
Well, we can find different people to do that. And
yeah,
there's the science, there's the practicality of farming, and then there's finding the right spot of government to prod, should we say? I'm trying just minding my language, Timothy. Yes, indeed. Great stuff. Another good session. Thank you so much, everybody. For
okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.